Welcome, everyone. So hi, I'm Daniel. I work at Mathspace. I'm here today with Cory. And so Cory, he's the middle years curriculum leader at Essendon Keilor College. And so Cory is going to be sharing some learnings from their school's early implementation of the VIC 2.0 maths curriculum. So we'll get more into this a little later. But long story short, the school switched from another textbook resource to Mathspace print and digital resources in the start of 2024. And because our resources were aligned to the 2.0 curriculum, Cory and his team made the decision, you know what, let's just adopt the 2.0 curriculum early. So they started that process at the beginning of last year. And so that's very different compared to a lot of schools who are just really doing that implementation this year. So Cory's going to share some early learnings. And so hopefully that's going to be really valuable to those of you who've made the time to come today. Thank you. This is actually a workshop we presented at MAV, at the annual MAV conference at the end of last year. So we had some good feedback and good engagement in that session, but not every teacher can make it to MAV. It's usually maybe only one or two teachers per school sometimes. And even then, there are so many workshops at the MAV conference, you don't always get to the ones that you want to. So Cory graciously volunteered to come back with me because we both facilitated that workshop last year. So now we're doing it again here on Zoom, and we've got lots more people here today. So we are able to, share this with more people, which is great. I thought I'd better start with an acknowledgement of country first. So we wanted to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land. So Cory and I are both presenting from Wurundjeri land, so we want to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people, their elders past, present, and emerging. We aim to respect them, their history, their future, by respecting and maintaining this land that supports us. And I should probably add, as educators, always thinking about how we can do things better and how we can, promote Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture, as well as how we can be more inclusive to those cultures as well in our education. Now, first, a little bit of housekeeping. I expect the webinar today to go for about an hour. Okay, and just as a reminder, this covers years 7 to 10 curriculum. Okay, so Cory works at a secondary college. So if you are a primary school teacher and you've kind of accidentally signed up, sometimes these emails, we do send them to combine P to 12, P to 9 schools. And sometimes these emails can accidentally get in front of a primary school teacher. So if you are in the primary space, more than welcome to log off unless you are interested in making a move to the secondary space soon. This recording, the session is being recorded as we speak, and it will be sent to anyone who's registered. So that just means that you do have to leave the webinar early. That's totally fine. You will get a copy of the full recording. Do try to stick around because we're going to have some Q&A time. So hopefully getting to engage the audience. We're going to do some QA time both in the middle of the webinar as well as at the end of the webinar. So there will be opportunities for questions and answers. Okay. Now, as a reminder, because we are in Zoom, there is a Q&A button. Okay. So click that button if you want to pose a question. That way we can keep track of the questions. The chat box is also live, but just keep in mind, if you put your question there, we're probably going to lose track of it because then the chat will continue and we'll get halfway through the webinar and it'll just be too tricky for myself to kind of go back and look at all those questions. So please use the Q&A button to ask a question. And that way we can not maybe get through every question, but as many as we can. Okay. Also remember in the chat box, do remember you should set your message preference to go to all attendees if you want to be chatting and have everyone listen to what you say, because what you say is of value. Okay. If you've accidentally got it set on all panelists, it will mean that only Cory and I see your message. So if you do want to write us something privately, be my guest, but probably better to just put it as all attendees, and that way we can all share from your input. Okay, so before we get started on the webinar itself, as I mentioned, we are doing print textbooks at Mathspace now. So if you're a teacher and you come from a Mathspace school, you might not be aware that we now offer print textbooks for years 7, 8, 9, and 10. And so our textbooks are, I think they're pretty good. I'm very biased, obviously, working at Mathspace, but What feedback I've got that's positive about the textbooks is that there's not a lot of bloat, okay? We're pretty strict on, if it's in the year 7 curriculum, it's in the year 7 book. If it's in the year 6 or the year 8 curriculum, it's not in the book, okay? We might, of course, revise things from time to time at the beginning of a chapter, so that's not always the case, but certainly we like to keep things lean and not bloated, okay? Something else that we do at Mathspace is that we have 2 year 10 books, okay? And so this is a bit different to the other publishers. We have a pre-general textbook as well as a pre-methods textbook, okay? So from our research, we found there were a lot of schools in Victoria streaming year 10 in this way, okay? So grouping year 10 students who are going to go on to VCE general maths into a pre-general stream, and then students who are likely to go on to methods going into a pre-method stream. So we decided to do things a little differently and develop books with that in mind. Okay, so I'll just quickly flick to the contents page of the general maths book. Okay, hopefully you can see this on my screen. Please tell me if you can't. Okay, so you'll see an example like chapter 1, indices and surds. Okay, surds we wouldn't generally teach in a pre-general group, right? Because they're going to go on to VC general maths and they don't really need that kind of knowledge on surds. So it's a 10A topic, so we just keep it out of the pre-general textbook. Okay, we typically cover actually not the full year 10 curriculum. As you know, the year 10 curriculum, if you are a year 10 teacher, it's big. So we've actually only got about 80% of the core year 10 curriculum in the print textbook itself. Okay, but that 20% of core year 10 topics, so for example, in quadratics, the quadratic formula and the discriminant, these are actually a part of the core year 10 curriculum, but we take it out of the print book. Feedback from some schools is that, they might teach quadratics to the pre-generals because they kind of have to, but then they're not going to go into that great level of detail compared to the pre-method students. So that content, of course, is available online, just not in the print. And so if we keep going through, the print textbook actually stops at chapter 11, okay, at networks, okay? So all the chapters after that, algebraic fractions, a lot of that is core year 10 curriculum. But again, we keep it out of the print book because we want this more focused on pre-general students. But it is still available online if you are going to teach algebraic fractions to your students in your year 10 pre-general. Okay, and so a bit of a similar story in pre-methods. Okay, so pre-methods, of course, we are going to include 10A topics like surds because that's going to prepare kids to go into VCE maths methods. All right, but as we keep cycling through, you'll notice some of the easier stuff around linear equations and linear graphs. We kind of take that out because that's already kind of been done for a couple of years. And so we just kind of assume that a pre-methods class can kind of skip those topics quite confidently. And as we keep going, this textbook actually stops at chapter 16. So at chapter 16, it's on bivariate statistics. Then everything else after that is online only, okay? So networks, again, it's part of the core year 10 curriculum, but you don't really need networks when you go into VCE methods. So we made the decision to keep this textbook a bit smaller and keep that out of the print book. Similar with geometry and proofs. There are other 10A topics that arguably some pre-methods classes in Victoria, they would teach these topics because it's kind of getting a head start on VCE methods, but our curriculum team made the decision like, you know what, these topics are supposed to be taught from scratch in VCE, so why don't we just keep these out of the print textbook as well? And then, you can access it online still if you want to be able to give those kids a head start in those topics. But the curriculum team felt that, the skill building in year 10 would be better suited in the other topics, and these topics can then be introduced in VCE methods. So that's just a bit of our print books, okay? And so this is what it looks like in Mathspace when you're a teacher using our platform, okay? So if you've not seen Mathspace before, this is what it looks like for a teacher. You can kind of click this drop-down menu. And part of the reason why our textbooks aren't very bloated is because we give teachers access to everything from grades 3 all the way up to year 12. So even if I'm a year 7 teacher and I do want to revise some kind of grade 4, grade 5 level work with my year 7 class because they're a couple of years behind, I have access to the primary school curriculum. So that's something that not a lot of other text publishers do. That's something quite unique to Mathspace that we have in digital format, grades 3 to 6 curriculum. Okay, coming to that year 10 pre-general book. So this is something new, by the way, if you are a school that uses Mathspace, that I wanted to just quickly share before we jump to Cory, okay, is that we now have a materials guide in Mathspace. So we only added this about 1 or 2 weeks ago, I believe, into the Mathspace program. So you've got access to this now, even if you are a school that doesn't use our print books, but you do use Mathspace as a digital program, okay, you have access to this materials guide. So it sits at the top of the textbook. And so you've got these great resources now to help you in your implementation of the new 2.0 curriculum. So we have content and syllabus mapping documents for each of the books for year 7, 8, 9, 10 pre-general, 10 pre-methods, got unit programs, worked solutions, fully worked solutions to all of our textbook questions, okay? And then topic tests. So this has become a real popular one. So in the topic tests here, you can come into a chapter, like if I'm in year 10 and I'm teaching quadratics, for example, I've got access to 3 summative assessments that are editable Word documents. Okay, so if I jump into this level 2, for example, this is an editable Word document. So I could, if I wanted to, print this out and use this as like an end of topic test as a summative assessment. Okay. Or I can just be copying and pasting this into my existing assessments. And then that way I can kind of refresh assessments for the new 2.0 curriculum. Okay, so these are pretty popular now. And I would say as well, we've got the work solutions too. So we provide the teachers with the work solutions to the questions so that you can easily grade any test questions that you might be using from our test banks. Okay, and something that's also really popular is a marking scheme as well. So for example, question 1 in this test has 8 marks. There's 4 parabolas that the kids are required to sketch, and so each of the 4 parabolas has 2 marks each. So giving teachers those instructions on, how to grade these tests as well. So pretty useful. You might not have known that you even had access to this. Hopefully now you do. So great. Let me go back to my slides here. So if you'd like to know more, if you're from a school that doesn't use Mathspace, you can book a meeting with either Craig or myself. Craig is my colleague. I believe he's in the audience somewhere, but he's not on the panel. So Craig looks after schools typically kind of east and south of Melbourne, as well as in regional Victoria. I typically look after the schools in the inner city, as well as north and west of Melbourne as well as some of regional Victoria as well. So there are QR codes on the screen here. If you are a school that doesn't use Mathspace and you'd like to meet with us and learn a bit more about our resources, feel free to book a meeting. Otherwise, you can come to our website, mathspace.com.au, and reach out to us there. If you don't really know who you're supposed to be talking to, just scan either one. Doesn't really matter. Craig and I will make sure you speak to the right person. Okay. One last thing from me is that in 2 weeks' time, we are doing a pub night. We're doing a professional networking event in Carlton at the Lincoln Hotel. So it's going to be from 4:30 p.m. onwards. You're more than welcome to come along. We'll probably do an email about this later in the week. So if you haven't heard of it, that's totally fine. You're hearing about it for the first time. Again, if you're interested, it's free drinks, open bar. So come along. It's on Mathspace, our shout. It's not really like a sales pitch or anything like that. It's more just us kind of giving back to the maths teacher community. Cory's been to one of these before as well. So I'm sure he can tell you that it's just a bit of fun. And yeah, come along if you like, if you've got the time. It is actually happening directly after the Melbourne Mathematics Conference. Okay, so we're hopefully going to grab some people from that conference as well, and they're going to come too. So yeah, if you're free and it's kind of easy for you to get to, please feel free to come on down. Okay, I'll put this QR code up again at the end of the session today. All right, that's enough from me. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to pass on to Cory. And so Cory is now going to take over, and for the rest of the session, he'll be talking about their school's implementation of the 2.0 curriculum. I might chime in from time to time, but for the most part, it's going to be Cory sharing the learnings. Thanks, Cory. Take it away.
All right. Can we hear me all right? Yes, awesome. And slide sharing, we're in the right spot. Can you see the...
I can see it. Looks good. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. So, hello, everyone. I am Cory. I have been a teacher for almost 9 years. So middle child energy. I was having a look at some of the names. I think is that you, Emmy, from uni days? I feel like that is you over at Sunshine. So if it is you, hello, good to see you again virtually. Good, you're still in the game, still kicking on, which is good. Always good when that happens. So quick premise, like, as I said, I'm in teaching almost 9 years. I've got some understanding, some knowledge, but I'm no expert in that sense. Like, we're all learning, we're all growing. Um, and for me, this whole journey is more about improving. And I wanted to, and obviously Dan approached me last year about an interest in sharing. And for me, it was very much, I'd love to share just to connect, we're all out there to improve numeracy and mathematics in our young people. And so for me, this is not about showing the way to do it. It most definitely isn't. I can assure you already, there are still some tweaks that we are working out. But hopefully at the end of the day, you can take away like, oh, I like that idea. Oh, I wonder what he's thinking there. Maybe I'll touch base and see what he's thinking. Like, ultimately, my whole goal is to improve our mathematics teaching here in Victoria. I guess other states, but we like Victoria. But anyway, so what I wanted to do, and I'll sort of shift through the first bit a bit quicker, because when we originally did this presentation, it was just off the back of 2024. We jumped in headfirst into 2.0. So obviously we've had a little bit of reflection since then. So just really quickly, EKC, Essendon Keilor College, bit about us. We government school in the Essendon region, obviously, and Keilor region. We currently have 3 campuses, 2 junior and 1 senior, and about sort of 300 across the junior in total and 300 across the senior. So not huge, growing, hopefully. But it's sort of in terms of our student context, very big sporting culture amongst the community. A lot of students coming in, parts of sporting teams. Apparently everyone's going to be an AFL player or an NBA player. I've talked to them about the probability of that, but they're not quite on board there. Yeah, like we have students who are capable, very much so. But I think for us, our biggest challenge is creating aspirational learners, having really had challenging yourself in the space of academics and particularly mathematics. And so, yeah, so our big goal, and I think this is obviously a shift and trend across a lot of schools now, is that shift to student growth versus not just an achievement per se. How can we, when kids come to us in year 7, I'm the middle years campus curriculum leader here at middle years. How do we, at the end of year 9, say that we've made an impact? So that's sort of our big goal. And as I sort of put in brackets at the top, context does matter, I think, in terms of how you set up your curriculum, how you sequence your curriculum, and even some of those things that Dan's mentioned about having textbooks that are maybe a bit more aligned to your setting. So we've actually, and I'll talk about in a sec, I've really appreciated some of those in our context, those textbooks. So really quickly, sort of went through again. So what did we learn in the process of jumping in early? And obviously now we're sort of all in that boat to a sense. So yeah, I'll try not to. So I think I'll get to the juicy stuff, which is essentially what is our sequencing and what we thought about it, and see how it compares to what you've got, and whether that's does it track? Does it not track? Am I missing something? Maybe I need you. Give me some info. So number 1, that's my wonderful colleague, and we went old school. We sat down with Post-it notes. We sat down with butcher's paper. Hadn't done that since year 5 art. And we literally mapped out all the key parts of the new curriculum. So 7, 8, and 9. Where does it sit? How does it look? We had, it was actually really interesting, and we were very fortunate that we were able to leverage to get a full day for us to do that, which is obviously not always the case. But that was really, really important. And I think it helped us start well, rather than maybe just, oh, we'll grab that from that, or we'll keep that the same and we'll tweak that. I actually found it a really formative from my own understanding, but also from a curriculum perspective, actually being able to look at it from the beginning. How do we want to get from 7 to 9 again? So when they leave our middle years campuses, where are they? What are they up to? What have they learnt? And then something near and dear to my heart, Google Sheets, can cause a lot of tension for some people, or those Excel purists. among us. But I'm quite happy. Google owns me. Must know everything about me by now. But I'm a big believer in some really good user-friendly documentation. Like that is something that I think we do pretty well here. This is an example of something that we've rolled out across every sort of curriculum area now. So every curriculum area across the whole school has a document that looks a bit like this, where we have hyperlink documents to our key units, our key assessments, our key redemption tasks, all sorts of things like that. Happy to share this if anyone is really interested. But I'm a big believer in having consistent and user-friendly. I know the documentation gets bandied around and there's like a bit of a shudder from some people, but I think it can be a really positive thing in a dynamic and collaborative environment. So this is sort of the overall scope of sequence, and this is sort of something we've come up with. We've tweaked it a little bit actually since then, but this idea of a unit plan, what does it look like across a topic, which we've all, from the dawn of time of education, talked about unit plans and scope of sequences. But I think the only thing to say here is have a plan rather than the ad hoc approach. Or Sydney geography is how I label it. Don't Sydney geography it. Have a Melbourne, neat perpendicular road situation. Have a plan, line it up. GNAG's just an instructional model. We've all got them somewhere. Someone's got a different acronym all over the place. But yeah, again, any of these things, very happy to share. Always happy to talk this sort of stuff. But again, all of our maths units from 7 to 10 now, 10 I'll talk about in a sec. The 7 to 9, every single one of our units follows this unit plan, which is hyperlinked back into our scope of sequence. So you can pretty much look at a year from your 7, 8, and 9 now, and you see the whole year. And then you can also see across the year what's everyone working through at the same time. So that's something that we can really, has been a real powerful part of our mathematics approach here. And look, I don't have to sell it per se, but I think it's been really, really, really useful in a we are in an interesting space at the moment, particularly government schools, in terms of getting permission to teachers in. We're getting grad teachers in. We're getting a lot of movement from teachers across schools, across campuses, things like that. So to have a really clear, easy to use set of documentation that people can pick up and use can really benefit the user experience, the student experience. So, it's not, can be really good. And the other big one I really like is how do you have the structure and a clear process without losing a bit of that teacher flair? Like it's not too prescriptive. And then also, again, the idea of team and collaboration versus the individual. So these are just some of the things that have been successful in this sort of approach. Obviously, quick shout out to Mathspace. But I've been on the Mathspace journey, I don't know, 7 or 8 years now, almost since I started teaching at my previous school. And I just really think that they've got a quality resource and it matters. And for me, as Dan has mentioned, having that really, it's clean, it's clear. There's not a lot of fat on it, so to speak, in my opinion. I really like that. It's down to the point. And the big one is I like the digital print combo. Like it gives you a lot of flexibility as a classroom teacher. You can still have that textbook and still focus on some of those handwritten bookwork skills, but then you've also got the flexibility to go, hey, bang, Jack, you're doing really well. Hey, let's lead that. Let's jump on Mathspace. I've actually got a year 8 exercise I want to get you through, and this is in year 7. Or in reverse, like we've got some students who are really coming in quite low. We can all be working on Mathspace, but I can put together a nice little year 5 level task for a few kids, year 6 level task. And it's not super onerous. You sort of pick up some skills and it becomes quite quick to use. So for me, it has allowed us to be really dynamic in our approach to teaching mathematics, which is obviously, as we're all experiencing, the capacity in a room is vast. So it does give you a lot of flexibility there. And yeah, I think it's a quality resource. So I think that's been really helpful. And particularly with year 10. So that's been a big focus for us this year. Using those pre-general, pre-method textbooks. And I think that's been successful to date. So it's only been a term and a half, but having particularly our pre-general, like with a textbook and Mathspace, it's a bit more user-friendly in terms of students who are probably heading in that general pathway, or look, for some students, potentially a no math pathway. It's been a really quality support. Couple of Mathspace. I know, Dan, you've already talked about these. Did you want to say anything at this point?
Just quickly, yeah, for those who've used Mathspace, you'll obviously be familiar with this. This is just an example of like a report that you get. So the benefit of using Mathspace as a digital resource is that not just the work is graded for you as a teacher, but you really get a lot of in-depth data on the students and how they're answering their work. So there's this student, for example, where you can see there's a difference between getting a question wrong versus partially correct versus correct. So if you just go to the next slide, Cory, you'll see it here, for example, where students can make a couple of mistakes, but they're showing their work and they're getting feedback on their work. And you can see in the help panel on the right-hand side of the screen, we actually now have AI built into the platform as well. So students can actually have a conversation with AI to actually be able to help them, in terms of trying to reach that answer and get that kind of maths tutor experience, if you will. And if you skip ahead to the next slide there, Cory, this is just another example of like, it's like you're looking at a student's workbook. When you go into Mathspace and you look at the kids and what they're doing online, you can see not only whether they're getting questions right or wrong, but how are they approaching the questions? How many errors are they making on the way to the right answer? Just like as if you were looking at their workbook. So, I've got a lot of schools that just use Mathspace as a classroom resource or as a homework resource. But the benefit of bringing Mathspace in as a core resource, like Cory and his team at EKC, is that you don't have kids jumping between Mathspace and then like another platform, and then for like textbook, and then another platform for assessment. You can just do it all in the one resource with Mathspace. So it's a bit easier for the students and also for the teachers. All of us, we've always got to keep on top of how to do things online, and it can be a real load to have to learn how to constantly, do PD to use all of these different resources. So doing less, using less and doing more is great. And we've heard as well from a lot of schools that there are principals, school leaders out there who are wanting to, reduce the amount of resources on a book list for the maths department, or save some money. And so, being able to have a print textbook with Mathspace now, with the digital subscription, we bundle together for $75. Otherwise, through a book list company, we do have a resale price of $90 typically, when it's done through Campion, for example. But yeah, if you do work with us directly, we can give you that wholesale price of $75. And so that gives your students the print book as well as their Mathspace subscription. So yeah, that's it from me, Cory. We can stop here for Q&A. Okay, so let's have a look at the Q&A section. Cory, you might not have seen this. Lots of people in the chat requesting those links to your curriculum docs.
I just saw that just then. So very happy to.
You might have to give them to me, and then I can organize them to be emailed.
Yeah. Well, we can definitely follow that up. I can definitely pass you through those.
Yep.
As I said, I just think we should be helping each other out. So if they can be useful, even if you sort of tweak to your context, I'm very happy to do that.
Yep. Yeah, great. We don't actually have too much in the Q&A at the moment. Saman just humbly requesting whatever material he can get his hands on. So sure thing, Saman. Yeah, we'll definitely get that organized.
100%.
What we'll do probably is if we're going to send out the recording early next week, likely, I'll just ask the team to also maybe include some links to some blank templates, perhaps, of
Yep. We can definitely organize that. Sounds good.
Okay. Yeah, if there's anything that you're thinking about now that you want to bring back to your context, or if there's anything you want more clarification on, please feel free to keep using the Q&A. Or, if you want to share some of your own experiences implementing the 2.0 curriculum this year. Actually, that reminds me, I was supposed to start the session with a poll.
Yes.
Maybe
Throw it
we'll
in
do
now,
that
maybe.
now. Maybe this is a good time because we don't have
I
many
think it
questions.
is. This is a good time.
So let's launch this poll. It should now hopefully be appearing on your screens. So maybe this is a perfect time to share. So which statement here most closely matches your school's implementation of the new curriculum? you can choose one response. Okay. So there's the very confident response of, yep, we've got everything, all our lesson plans, assessments, unit planners, etc. You might be using existing documentation from another external resource, like a textbook, like Cambridge, for example. Maybe this is still a work in progress. Maybe you haven't quite finished that as a school. You're still in that implementation process. Alternatively, I have heard of some schools where they may have hired an external consultant to help them with this work. So feel free to share if that's the case with you all. And then honestly, maybe your school hasn't made that many changes yet or haven't had the opportunity. These are anonymous responses, so please feel free to share that. And don't worry, I'm not going to know and I'm not going to tell on you. So yeah, I'll leave this open for 1 more minute. Okay. Yeah.
Notice I can't vote as a panelist. It says I'm not allowed to vote.
No. What would you vote for, Cory?
Uh, Probably the third one. We haven't finished making changes. I think
Yeah.
we've, and I'll talk about this obviously, but I think we've come a long way, particularly 7 and 8. I feel really positive about where we are with our 7 and 8 curriculum.
Yeah.
9 and 10 has sort of now been our next big focus this year.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely a bit of work, particularly year 10 in what that looks like and getting things up to scratch, I guess. Love to know if there's any jobs going at this, any schools hiring external consultants. Don't know if that's an option.
I came across one school that did that last year.
Okay, right.
A government school, not a private school. So
Yeah, right.
I won't give away their identity, but yeah. Okay, great. Let's finish the poll. So out of all of those responses, it looks like, yeah, that we're in the process. We haven't quite finished
Yeah.
yet. So that's not a surprise. So that's 45% of the people here today voting for that. I'll share the results. So we did have 32% of people who are just, they're leveraging the resources that they already have, be
Yeah.
it from Cambridge or Mathspace or a textbook publisher perhaps. And then, yeah, a couple of people coming from a school where they're done. Congratulations.
Fantastic. Get them on the webinar, I reckon.
Yeah, maybe I should have asked them to do it, Cory. Why
Yeah,
not?
yeah, exactly.
All right. All good.
Awesome.
Thanks, everyone. Let's get back to it, Cory.
Yeah, we'll keep going. So this next section is the nitty-gritty, which hopefully a bunch of maths teachers will be okay with. So what I'll do, I'll show you what our year 7 scope and sequence is, essentially. I'll give you a second to have a little peruse through. Maybe this is a good opportunity if you're with a colleague or you're at your device or at work or whatever. Do you pull up unit plans, see where it's the same, where it's different? And then I'll sort of talk through some thoughts and ideas about where we're coming from, and see what we end up with.
So if you've got any comments or clarifications on what you see on the screen about how EKC have made these decisions, Cory, I think you mentioned there was some reasoning for starting the year with statistics, for example.
Yeah. So sort of the rationale of where we ended up with this sequence. So we actually made the call from 7 to 10, which arguably, if you do general as well, it's 11 and 12, to start the year with statistics. And for two main reasons. One reason is it's just a bit more hands-on and a bit more fun sometimes, I think, which is always a nicer way to start the year, particularly with year 7s. But even with other year levels, in terms of you can get a bit more tactile, that sort of thing. And I think the other thing, it actually might have been Craig, Daniel, who made a really good point when I was talking to him about this. The sort of the spread of capacity and statistics seems to be a bit smaller than say your sort of heavier algebra linear type topics. So I find, and I've had this experience, like you've got a year 7 class coming in, and we all know year 7s were getting all sorts from different primary schools with different interests and different capacities in mathematics, it's actually tends to be a really good and positive start because the spread of capacity tends to be a little smaller. So as a teacher, it's actually a little bit easier to start the year as well. Um, so that's been really positive, and then we sort of shift into that very big number-based component. So number properties, squares, square roots, number patterns, things like that into your fractions, decimals, percentages, running our exam. And then because it's an 11-week term, woohoo, we've got a couple of weeks where we're going to focus, again, trying to sort of have that application concept. So can we apply some of our fractions, decimals, percentages into a more hands-on, tactile, good way to end the term, but also making those connections. And that sort of builds that semester one. And then we move essentially into algebra and graphing for term 3. And what we actually found, one of our big takeaways from last year, and we're sort of tweaked a little bit this year, is we actually gave that algebra equations. We've said 3 weeks, 4 weeks, but essentially what we're finding is we're sort of banking those together and allowing teachers to make a bit of a call as to, hey, we need to actually stick in sort of the number, our algebra pattern-based stuff a little bit longer. And we're finding that has been really successful. So we're not pushing kids quickly through algebra, which is notoriously everyone's favorite topic in mathematics. Not. So, and what we're seeing is kids are feeling success. They're actually, rather than potentially bang, 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 you've got your percentage that are okay. And a lot of kids are just going, I hate algebra. What's the point? There's letters everywhere. They're not letters, they're variables. But how do we giving kids extra time to actually engage with something that is super complex? Like they come out of primary school where they've still got the MAB blocks. They're still using fingers and hands and things. And then it can be a huge gap to then get kids to go, here's a textbook. And now we don't know what the number is and it's a letter. And that sort of throws a lot of kids off. So having taken the time to build concrete into representations into the abstract, it's been really, obviously you're still going to have your battles, but for the most part, it's been a really successful uptake of that topic. And then the old measurement geometry in term 4. Again, traditionally, motivation is lower. And again, getting something that I think the capacity gap is a bit smaller. And again, you can get kids up, you can get kids outside, you can measure things, you can do things. Yeah, so that's sort of our semester 2 or year-long year 7 sequence. We've had a lot of, we felt it went pretty well last year. We've kept the same order. We just had a slight change of lengths of topics. Thoughts, ideas, questions, anyone?
Actually, it's probably a good time to ask now. Eric had a great question.
Oh, did he? Yeah.
He's the head of maths over at St. Helena Secondary College. He asked, are you implementing algorithmic thinking and pseudocode in all or
Great
some of your
question.
units, or do you implement this as a separate unit?
The answer is we don't teach it in mathematics. We are, and I'll say this in inverted commas, attempting to teach it as a part of our STEM elective curriculum. So at our school, every student does a 6-month STEM elective across 7 or 8. So they do 6 months of STEM. We are attempting to cover that. But I'll be honest, we don't cover it very well at all, is probably the short answer. And I'd be interested if people are doing it well, are they picking it up? I haven't seen or heard of a school that does it as a part of their math curriculum. And if you do, does it work? Does it add value to your students in their teaching and understanding of mathematics? So it's my counter question.
Yeah, please feel free to write in the chat box if you are teaching at a school and perhaps you're implementing algorithmic thinking or pseudocode in the maths curriculum. Do you do it a little bit in different units, or do you do it as a separate unit? Yeah, we'd love to know. All right, maybe we should go to the next slide, Cory, because I think you did talk about some of those
look,
changes
the
there as
next
well.
slide is really just a summary of what I've said. So I won't obviously these slides, I assume, will go out with the presentation, with the video recording.
We can do that if that's what
Yeah,
you
just so rather than read a whole bunch of stuff. Basically, the things on the left is what I've just talked about. My big tweak that we still want to get better at in terms of 2.0 curriculum is a lot more of the uh, problem solving. Like I think we're pretty fluency heavy, which again, for our context in terms of kids coming in and their engagement in mathematics, that's been quite good. Like we're catering to that quite well. But how do we then build some more of those investigation, interpretation, that sort of stuff? There's a lot more of those words in VIC 2.0. So it's not just know this skill, know this skill, know this skill, but can you investigate this and this and this, and can you interpret this? So that's definitely and down the bottom, designing algorithms and using digital tools. So again, not quite sure what that looks like. Is that a big part of VCE? Should it be a big part of VCE? I'll leave that there. But I'll keep going. I'll keep going. That was just a quick input from Dan, I remember at the end of last year.
Oh, yep. I'll very quickly touch on this because we did cover this in a webinar last year, actually around about this time last year, with the head of curriculum, Erin Gallagher, and myself. That webinar had a lot of connection issues with Erin, so we ended up, Erin and I, meeting and re-recording the session and posting it onto YouTube. So the link is here in the slide deck, and if there is enough people that want us to share the slide deck, you'll have that link as well. But you can just go into YouTube and write Victorian curriculum Mathspace, and it will likely come up as a video uploaded last year. So in that video, I spoke about some of the changes being made to the primary school. And so these were some changes that I felt were quite pertinent, as in skills coming up from primary school and then skills going down from secondary to primary. So very quickly, some measurement skills around volume and capacity, volume of 3D shapes, that's now in the Victorian 2.0 curriculum no longer covered. So if you think about your grade sixes at primary schools this year, who have now implemented the 2.0 curriculum, teachers don't have to teach volume or capacity anymore. So they're going to be coming to secondary school next year with no idea about those concepts. Or perhaps if the students have done some extension work. So you do have to keep that in mind now. You can't really brush over the volume concepts anymore. You've really got to cover them from scratch. Nets of prisms, what a unit measurement of volume, all of that great stuff. Similarly, there is what comes up must come down. So there is some skills going down in the grade 6 curriculum. So the introduction of the Cartesian plane will now be done in grade 6, not in year 7. It's a space skill. So what used to be called geometry, now the space strand. Okay. And then a little bit of basic finding the unknowns in a numerical equation. That's going to go into grade 6 as well. So hopefully some of that kind of algebra and Cartesian plane work will be a little easier come next year, as your grade 6s will be exposed to that when previously they may not have when they come to your school next year. So yeah, that's it. I think we can keep going from there. If you want to know more, go watch the webinar. I go into it in a lot of detail, as well as Erin.
Cool. I've just seen a good question from Janesh. Is your CATS based on problem solving and modeling tasks or just testing fluency? And that's a really good question. I would say the bulk is very much fluency at the moment. And that has been identified from some of our senior team as something that particularly, like we were looking through, for example, we had a sort of a moderation type session and we were looking at some of the year 11 general year 11 methods exams, and the amount of words in a general exam is huge. Like, so and kids were struggling. So even though the mathematics was actually not complex and kids were pretty good at the maths, sitting in that exam and going, there's a one multiple choice question that's a paragraph. So we are definitely looking at making some adjustments to include at least, what that looks like. Do we include a 5-mark question as a part of each year levels cats. That style is probably something we're looking at. I'll keep going, but if people do have other thoughts about that, definitely just throw them in. Or whether you're assessing them separately, do you have a assessment that is just problem solving, and then you have, I don't know, lots of ideas.
Yeah.
Um,
Right. Let's keep
I'll
going.
keep going.
We'll go to
I'll
year
keep
eight.
going.
Yep.
So this is the year 8 sequence, and hopefully you'll realize it's very, very similar to our year 7 sequence, which is deliberate. Um, we very much wanted to model the year 8 curriculum off the year 7 curriculum. There's obviously slight changes and tweaks based on the sort of the focus of each topic, but the same idea, start with statistics, similar start to the year, similar breadth of capacity. I will say the 2.0 year 8 statistics is a little trickier than it's been in the past. Bit more about sampling, um, and but it does open itself up really nicely to to still do a lot of those hands-on, do your survey, but you start to build in like, okay, how do you do your survey? You don't just ask everyone in the class anymore. That's sort of year 7 approach. Okay, are you going to pick every third person in the class, or are you going to pick, and you start to talk about that sort of approach. So again, good start to the year. Um, and then again, moving into that number based stuff. So looking at the real numbers and percentages and financial rates. So one of the big changes that we ended up deciding. So traditionally, as far as I remember, at least, rates and ratios always one topic, always sits together, and we looking sort of at the curriculum, looking at the only topic in the history of me teaching mathematics that kids ask so many questions about is finance. And it's good. It's like, it's the only topic that we get the most buy-in. And so what we ended up sort of deciding was to sort of combine this sort of percentage increase, decrease. So there's that sort of component of percentages, and then building in the rates component, which makes a lot more sense contextually. So we start to look at GST, we start to look at, mortgage rates. That's all very interesting at the moment. Like, that sort of stuff. So that that's one of the, in my opinion, that was one of the best topics I taught last year. Because there was so much connection and interest from kids, and being able to sort of, rather than just sort of the general, we teach a rate, we teach a ratio, we tack rates onto the sort of percentage increase, decrease, finance language sort of stuff, and made that a bigger topic. And then, look, I'll be honest, we popped ratios, and there's a apparently, or there's a dot point on time in the year 8 curriculum. And ironically, we didn't get time for time last year. So the ratios and time, we haven't quite solved that one. We're sort of maybe thinking about squeezing a bit of ratios in the year 7 fractions component, just to sort of build that in a bit. But we also did want to give probability a good chance because we don't cover it as completely in year 7. So again, we wanted to give that a good sort of 3 to 4 weeks in semester 1. And then semester 2, very similar. Most of term 3 is based on that algebra graphing. Moving into a bit of measurement, and then the big change is then again having Pythagoras in year 8, which actually went really well. I think kids, they look at it and they sort of freak out, and then you sort of go through the process of what it means. And again, if you've sort of done a bit of work on those square roots in year 7 and year 8 earlier in real numbers, they don't freak out as much about the square roots anymore.
Yeah.
And they sort of feel really smart because they're like, oh, look at this Pythagoras. Everyone talks about that, and it's really, so it ended up working really well. Tacked into measurement, it just sort of was another component of the measurement topic for kids. And then always the long forgotten geometry that sits at the end of the year, which we always get to, but yeah, it's definitely a strategic, what are we going to cover in those last couple of weeks,
Yeah.
etc.
I had a quick question, Cory, because
Mm.
from memory, the ratios and rates in the old curriculum used to be paired together under the number strand,
Yeah.
but ratios then got moved over to the measurement strand, and then you've got now time being taught in year 8. So putting those together, but then away from the other measurement topics, was there a
Oh,
reason?
that's a good. There's not a reason.
Okay.
But actually, that makes me think um, whether we could tweak that. Yeah.
Okay.
So no good reason is the answer. Is probably very simply we didn't have a spot to put it, so that's where it sat. Um, that's probably the honest
All
response
right.
right there.
If you're looking for an external consultant, I'll send you my
Yeah,
contact.
right, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
I'll talk to the principal. I know how that'll go. So anyway, so that's year 8. Again, and I think we had a lot of traction, 7 and 8, and our assessment also was very similar. Like we did an assessment on statistics. Everyone does an assessment on statistics. So it's a great way as a team to start the year because you're all working on assessment that is like, oh, what have you got in the year 7 one? Oh, is that year 7 level or is that year 8? Let's put that in the year 8 one. So that was really positive from a team perspective. Um, Again, having some sort of number-based assessment. In this case, in year 8, we focused on the percentages and financial rates as an assessment. All sort of, again, tests, no sort of, I haven't really done any problem-solving type assessment, very much the standard test. And then term 3, again, we ended up doing a combination of algebra and the solving component of linear as an assessment. And then in term 4, we did an assessment on Pythagoras with a little bit of measurement. So currently one sort of main assessment each term. We are trying to build in. So see where it says CFAT. I don't know if you've seen that acronym before. Common Formative Assessment Task. So trying to build some consistency across our classes with how we measure progress through the topic. So that's just what they are. So they're like 6, 8 mark mini quizzes type thing. We give them out, all the kids sort of do them like a mini test, and then we generally peer mark it, and there's a moment for reflection in terms of what are we still missing, what do we need to improve on, etc.
Great. We better jump over to year 9.
Yeah,
Just as a
keep going.
reminder, we will share the slide deck. So some of those summary learning slides, you can kind of read that in your own time. I'm just aware we've got about 5 minutes till 4:30, so
Yep,
we've still
I'll
got
whiz
two more
through
year
this one.
levels. So
Year 9 is probably our biggest. I'm not sold on what we're doing at year 9. So if people do have thoughts or ideas. Again, we've started with statistics. We ended up shifting around the process from 7 and 8, just as people are aware. You obviously, year 9, you're doing subject selection, things like that, which math streams are you picking in year 10. So getting that algebra and linear in early was sort of a big part of, when they do their exam on those topics and their assessment on those topics, we get a pretty decent picture. Are they where they're tracking in a math pathway? And then term 3, big sort of component on finance with a bit of we have a bit of an idea to do a bit of work on sequences and recursion, knowing that's a big part of the general um, uh, study design. And most currently, contextually, most of our students will be sitting in a general pathway. So just giving them an extra week or two just to start engaging with those ideas. Trigonometry, again, you could almost argue is the reverse. It's a bigger part of the methods. You need that understanding. And then a nice sort of way to end term 4 when year 9s are not pleasant people, do some probability again. So, and again, we've tacked on scale and similarity, but I'll be honest, I would be very surprised if we spend much time in that before we do. And then they sort of wrap up early and do a step up program at our senior campus for the last few weeks. And that's our year 9 sequence. Again, very much open to thoughts and feedback. This is just something and again, we're trialing, we're tweaking, we're seeing what's in front of us. What are we noticing? How can we adjust to improve? And that's sort of, I assume, a process that we're all sort of a part of. Again, I won't go through it because we've got no time, but I have whacked in our proposed. This is very much happening as we speak, literally. Our what would sort of your pre-general 10 standard class, as well as the uh, pre-methods 10A sort of class. So this is what we're trialing. So for context, we actually kept U10 at 1.0 last year with old textbooks, with our Cambridge textbooks. So we only shifted to 2.0 this year in year 10 with these new textbooks. So it's very much a work in progress, our year 10 sequence this year. It is for 29 ish. Again, I'll leave that up there. Dan, I'm very happy to stick around for, I don't know, 5 or 10 more
Mm.
minutes if people do have questions,
Yeah.
want to clarify anything,
Let's
etc.
open the floor up to questions, Cory, but maybe just go back one or two in the slides just so that the pre-general or pre-methods is there in case anyone does want to
Yeah.
look at that. But yeah, let's have a look. Nothing in the Q&A box, so that's great. Any final questions? Because we are hitting 4:30 soon, and we know many people probably want to run home if you're at school, or go re-engage with family if you've made it home and you're watching the webinar from home. There was a question earlier actually in the chat from Zaklina actually. I believe they posed it to the whole
Oh, yeah. Someone else just, how are we reporting on
cohort.
VIC 2.0?
Yeah. So how's the school reporting?
Badly? Is that a response? No. It's really interesting, and again, I'll let what other people think, but with the sort of we're currently at one progression point for mathematics, versus the original three progression points. And I'll be honest, actually, even though you would consider it potentially less work, I've actually found it much harder. I
Mm,
almost preferred um, having those sections because I found it a lot more straightforward to, because the question is if you average out their results, which is probably what most people would do across a semester and go, oh, they've averaged 68%, they're probably at level, but you have a look and they're like, they got 51% on their algebra assessment and 89 on their measurement assessment, for example. And it's like, do you put that kid at level? I
mm,
probably wouldn't say they are,
yeah.
but for all intents and purposes, maybe they are. Yeah. So I don't know. And I'd be very interested and to see what the department come up with in the next 12 months to see if there's any adjustments to that or more information.
Yeah, I've actually heard that as well from my chats with some of the schools that I speak with. So yeah, you're definitely not the only one, Cory. Having that one grade level report, you would think is easier because it's one instead of three. But yeah, like how you come up with that, yeah, quite tricky. All right, look, nothing coming up in the Q&A chat. So Cory and I are going to stick around for another couple of minutes if you do want to ask questions. Interesting comment from Eric. We only report to the entire level
Yeah.
and not each strand. That's right. We are finding it difficult to determine the level. We're also currently discussing how to report to the capabilities.
Oh, the capabilities.
Hmm.
Oh, I was going to ask if you had any ideas. That's so because we currently have pulled out of mathematics any capability, so we are very fortunate
Hmm.
at our school, and we've decided that there's probably not a good way for mathematics to assess some of those capabilities. So, for example, ethics sits in the science faculty. Um, Critical and creative thinking, I think, is a combination of arts, tech, and English, I think, at the moment.
Okay.
Um, so, yeah, traditionally, maths has often been a part of the critical and creative thinking component. Um, but how you assess that as a part of a maths test, I'm not sure. Um,
Yeah.
hmm.
True. Thanks, Eric. Now, I'll just put this on the screen again in case there are anyone here who is at a school that doesn't use Mathspace and would like to know more. Feel free to book in just a quick kind of 15-minute Zoom meeting with either Craig or myself. Scan either one, and yeah, we'll make sure you speak to the right person. And yeah, we're more than happy to just kind of chat to you about our experience working with schools that use Mathspace. Mathspace is a very flexible resource. It can be used in many different ways. Cory's using Mathspace very differently here compared to when he was at Williamstown High School. So it's, yeah, feel free to just scan. Otherwise, come to our networking event. So I'll put this QR code up here as well. You will get an email about this in the next couple of days. So don't stress if you don't get to scan. There you go. Cory scanning. Woohoo. Come on down, man. Yeah. I'll be there. Craig will be there. Looks like Cory might be there. So yeah, feel free to come. Yeah, drinks on us, some nibbles, some food on us. And then, yeah, you'll be in Melbourne. Why don't you treat yourself? Go out to dinner afterwards. So make a night of it. So yeah. Great. We're going to formally finish there. As I mentioned, Cory and I will stick around for about another minute or two, but thank you so much, everyone, for coming along. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, we'll catch you at the next one.
Yeah.